Then we add globalization of the labor force, and then we add technology, and people have no chance. So they borrow debt, and then when that blows up, they get angry. And the people on the coasts blame the people in the middle, and the people in the middle blame the people on the coasts. It becomes a political divide. It's not to do with politics. Never has been. But what happens is people are angry, and they don't know who to blame. And that's a bigger force that we're seeing play out now. That's the rise of crypto came out of all of this as well. Occupy Wall Street Bets, the online network communities that we're seeing formed where people are getting together to take the system in their own hands in different ways. It is a fourth turning moment. It's a societally structural shift that happened in 2008 in ways we won't understand for maybe several decades, but it changed everything. So you just keep compounding negative GDP. It's like, how's that going to work? And is that what people want? It's all well and good, a bunch of Austrian economist doomers saying, well, we just want to blow everything up. I don't think we can. It's too big because the cost to society and humanity is even larger than the costs of what is happening now, which is driving the 1% versus the 99% and all of the other issues we've got going on. So there's one outcome, and this is where it starts to get contentious. The only outcome is to increase productivity. And so we enter the exponential age. So firstly, the exponential age thesis is that we are at this nexus of technology of which mankind has never gone through, and it'll happen in the shortest period of time of any technological change ever. And it's all happening in a way that we will not be able to get our heads around into the global economic system. And it happened in a 3-week period when GPT-4 came out. It went from 0 to 100 million users in 5 weeks. I mean, oh my God. And we're all scrambling. And then we've had more developments there. But that's not just the exponential age. The next thing is, well, in 3 years' time, we're going to be having this conversation. It'll be like how all the Uber drivers and all the bus drivers and everybody's been laid off because of self-driving cars. That bomb is going to happen. We're at that cognitive dissonance now of like, well, it's not going to happen. They're never going to solve this. And then immediately it gets solved. Do you remember the arguments 2 years ago? Well, machine learning is hardly AI. Next minute AI comes along and we're like, fuck, is this generative? Is this AGI? We don't even know anymore, right? And that's going to happen with self-driving cars. Robotics. It's another trend. I mean, just look at that Optimus robot, and he's not the only one. Tesla are not the only people doing this. He happens to own the fastest supercomputer in the world, Dojo. The Optimus robot, the self-driving cars with all the visualization technology, the mapping of everything. And in addition, he now owns Twitter, which I argued a while ago was just to get the AI. And why he wants an unbiased Twitter is to get as much AI as possible. So we've got robots coming. We've also got genetic sciences. When you add AI into biotechnology, you create outcomes much faster. So we'll see huge breakthroughs in medicines. You would say that RNA vaccine technology is a huge breakthrough in technology. And we've got more than that, distributed computing power, space. I mean, today as we're speaking, Elon's just launched the largest rocket of this. The SWIFT payment system was the kind of globalized weapon. And even the EU don't want the SWIFT payment system anymore. Nobody does, because nobody wants reliance. So we're splitting into different factions in this multipolar world that is having real effects on technology, because now it's a technology race as well, about, you know, who can conquer space, who can conquer AI, who can conquer quantum computing. Because again, quantum computing is another one of these power law exponentials, because if you completely change the game on how much data can get crunched in one go, everything goes again. You know, the ridiculousness of what is happening. So yes, these things all weave together. They're all part of the same narrative. The only narrative, the only big shift outside of that narrative was obviously China coming into the WTO. You know, when they came into the world stage, that was a big structural shift, the biggest shift that we've had of our lifetimes, until AI came along, which I think is actually bigger than China entering the WTO. So China, it was like, you know, you're sitting in the bath and an elephant jumps in your bath and all the water gets displaced. That's what happened with China. And so it's been struggling to find its place. And this is going to be ongoing. But the Chinese population shrinking too. So their economic power is going to go down because they've got ridiculous debts. So it has to be a slow, ongoing process because there's too much debt in dollars and everybody needs it for trade. So if you go to this world that you see people talking about on Twitter, it's like, well, they're going to walk away from the dollar. Great. You've got the dollar debt and you've now got yuan or rupee income. Well, that's the recipe for a disaster. What most people have got is dollar debts and dollar income. If you're an oil producer, you can have dollar debts and you can have dollar income. It's the mismatch creates all sorts of problems. So I don't think this can happen quickly. And I don't know the answer to it. But that's why I'm not a believer in the dollar's going to collapse. Interesting enough, there's a very high correlation, lagged by 18 months, of the price of the dollar and QE. So the dollar rises in countries blew up and all of the banking system blew up. You know, Cyprus, they took the money out of the bank accounts, much what's happening in the US now. And seeing everybody lose everything is what got me into crypto because it gave me a sense of agency. And it is an answer to all of this. And that's why I've always referred to it as the Bitcoin life raft or a parallel financial system. It's actually not parallel. It's actually converging. And I think it converged in 2020. But I think, you know, from the Russian sanctions and basically destroying their sovereign reserves through to ongoing debasement of currency, through to the ever-changing geopolitics and the uncertainties, through to the fact that the adoption of digital technologies overall is increasing the probability of the adoption of digital systems of value, it kind of feels like, okay, well, this is the perfect place for me to get some agency back in my life where I'm not as restricted by the forces. Of course, we all are restricted by the forces because we have to earn a living. We have to live physically in a country where you either have to pay taxes, you have to be part of the political system, but they need other things. Now, they've been buying gold at record pace, obviously, because if the US seizes or renders useless the Russian reserves in US treasuries, then why would anybody want to hold US treasuries over an extended period of time? You either have to be friends of the US or you risk it. So I see a role, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why the Middle East is becoming very active participants in the market overall. And I think for individuals, because of the lack of trust, it's one thing we can trust because it's not driven by a government. All the governments can do is try and regulate it, but they can't get rid of it. And it actually empowers people to think that you're fighting the government when it comes to regulation. I mean, just look at Twitter. People love an enemy, and Gary Gensler is like enemy number one because he represents the old system, the system that let us all down. And he's kind of saying, look, we're there to protect you. And everyone's going, fuck you, you never protected us in the first place. We'd rather take our own risks with our own money, which is the agency thing that you talked about. So I think that trend is unstoppable. But then obviously the layer of Web3 that lays on top of it, you know, how can you use this technology in other new and unique ways is the driver that turns it into a Metcalfe's law adoption model because you're building systems on top of a network itself. So it kind of becomes self-reinforcing. The other really, really big thing, and people don't really understand it yet, is Ethereum having a yield and a liquid yield out to 12 months means you've got a money market curve for the internet.